I'm so depressed I don't know what I'm doing. I have not got a clue.
So, a while ago over in Letterboxd, I made a list titled Movies So Perfect I Will Never Review Them. And that's because they're so perfect I will never review them. The title kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? But I decided, what the hell, I might as well talk about them and at least acknowledge them. And the reasons for why I will probably never review these movies comes down to two things. Number one, they've already been talked about and dissected to death, and there really isn't anything new I can add to the discussion. The best I could do is put an edgy twist on it with memes and editing, but they've already been talked about at great length by many other people more talented and more knowledgeable than me. And the second reason is, I either have such a personal connection to them that I just overlook and ignore the issues no matter how glaring they are, or I'm just so in love with the movies that I don't really care. So if I were to review it, it would just be me sucking it off for 10 minutes and not really reviewing it how I normally would, and I feel like that wouldn't be that interesting to watch. So those are the two reasons why I'll probably never sit down and actually review these movies, because everything has already been said, there's really nothing more I can add, or I'm so in love with them that my review probably wouldn't be a review and more so just me sucking off the movie. Although I have made videos like that before. Look at my Man of Steel video. But Man of Steel is a very divisive film amongst fans and not unanimously loved, so I felt that video was necessary just because of how much of a hot take it was. Similar to the videos I made on BVS. Those weren't really popular opinions, so that's why they were different. As you're about to see, a lot of the movies I'm about to list off are movies that are very acclaimed or have already received a lot of high praise. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I have relationships with women and sex with men.
The Lord of the Rings trilogy. Need I say more? These films are damn near perfect on just about every level. But besides the awesome, grand, epic story that it's telling, I'm also a huge fan of how well made this movie is. The first one came out over 20 years ago, and all the effects hold up really well. Its makeup effects, its costumes, its use of miniatures, and even CGI just all looks great. And not to mention, the world of Middle-earth is just really fucking awesome, and really sucks you in once you get into it. Like, I was never the biggest fan of fantasy films, but I've always loved these three movies. And every year, I rewatch them at least once. Honestly, these films are the gold standard for epic fantasy adventures. And there hasn't been a fantasy film to top it since. Even if you're not the biggest fans of elves, magic, and dwarves and shit, I gotta say these movies are at least worth watching, just so you can experience them. And plus, you don't know, might even change your mind. Coming at you with three more movies. They're not part of a series or trilogy, but they all have the same director. Goodfellas, Casino, and Wolf of Wall Street. The Scorsese trio. Now I enjoy mostly all of Scorsese's films, but these three are probably my favorites. That's because all three of these films are very much similar when it comes to the filmmaking aspect, and they share a lot of qualities with each other. Of course, all three of them are based on real events, and they all tell these really long tales of some pretty shitty people. They have the structure to them where sometimes they'll break the fourth wall, there'll be different characters narrating over top of them, they'll flash back and forth to different events, and of course, they're all chock full with some very memorable moments and performances. To put it bluntly, it's just cinema at its finest. Yeah, I love these movies, all three of them are great. Up next is 300. Now I consider this Zack Snyder's like magnum opus. This movie sets out to do what it's trying to do flawlessly. You get some slick stylistic action, a story that's simple and easy to understand, with characters and moments that are just memorable. And not to mention, I think this has some of Zack Snyder's best visual storytelling. With the use of slow-mo and characters' expressions, you can tell when key and pivotal moments are about to happen. And not to mention, one aspect I really like about this film, that I learned to appreciate upon rewatching, is the use of the unreliable narrator. I know people complain about how terrible they make the Persians look here, and just how heroic the Spartans look. Once you realize the whole movie is being narrated by one of the Spartans to rally up the other Spartans, you realize that he's just embellishing everything, making Leonidas and the 300 look way more epic than they probably were, and making the Persians look much more monstrous than they probably were. And of course, at the same time, just talking about how great and righteous they are. And I even like the addition of adding all the political stuff of Sparta involving Leonidas' wife. Even that kept the movie engaging and interesting. Now this may sound really funny, but this was one of the movies that made me really interested in how films are made. You have no idea how much it blew my 13-year-old mind knowing that these locations, sets, and hell, even some of the people, were CGI and computer generated and shot on a soundstage in front of green screens. That just fucking blew my mind. I watched the behind the scenes making of featurettes and listened to the commentary, and I was just so damn interested in how the hell he did that. 300, Goodfellas, and Lord of the Rings trilogy were really what got me intrigued in filmmaking and the behind the scenes aspect of things. So yeah, 300, fucking epic. Next up, Scarface, directed by Brian De Palma and starring Al Pacino. One hell of a rise and fall story of an immigrant who becomes Miami's biggest drug pusher. Yeah, this movie is badass. It's one of those films that make you go like, yeah, I can start selling drugs. Then you see everybody starting to die and you're like, oh, know what? Never mind, I'm good. I don't know, I love movies like this. You see somebody come from nothing and they build this giant empire and become super fucking rich. You see the lifespan out of control and then you see them lose it all. And honestly, this film is very reminiscent of the next film I'm going to talk about, Ridley Scott's American Gangster, starring Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. Yeah, basically everything I said about Scarface applies here. Only difference is this is based on a true story. And what it does differently is it adds in the cop's perspective. So you see both sides of the fence. You see Frank Lewis take control and build his drug empire, and you see the police working on trying to take him down. Man, it's just an awesome film. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you check it out. So check out both Scarface and American Gangster. Two movies about the rise and fall of drug empires. Except, you know, one's based on a true story and a real person. Up next is Watchmen, which look at that, another Zack Snyder film, shocker. And I always recommend the director's cut, of course. Stylistically, it's one of my favorite looking comic book movies. It came out in 2009 and it still looks fantastic. But besides the slick and awesome looking visuals, I think the story is great. It starts off as something small, but then the plot starts to evolve into a giant conspiracy about preventing World War III. But I also love the alternative world that this movie takes place in. It goes, what if superheroes were real and they were around for decades? How would that alter the world? So it creates a very interesting universe and timeline where superheroes are real. And on top of all of that, the heroes in the movie are basically satirizing superheroes. Each hero has traits from pre-existing superheroes that we're aware of, like Superman, Captain America, The Question, and basically cranks them up to 11 and goes, what if this hero was actually like this? Although I will say the movie more so satirizes comic book films, whereas the graphic novel satirized the comic book genre as a whole. And of course the movie changes several things, but you know what? I don't care. I still think it's great regardless. And I also think Watchmen is one of Zack Snyder's best films. Shrek 1 and Shrek 2. Not only do I have a nostalgic connection to these films, because I saw them when I was a kid when they first came out, but they're actually great animated movies. They held up surprisingly well. And now that I'm older, I actually understand a lot more of the jokes and references than I did when I was a kid. And now it's even more hilarious. And not only that, between these two films, it tells a really great story with Shrek. And he surprisingly grows as a character a lot between these two films. But not only do I have a nostalgic connection to them, but also there's already videos out there really diving into these films. And I recommend you check them out if you want to see someone really get into it. So yeah, Shrek 1 and Shrek 2, classics.
Get this through your head, you Jew motherfucker, you!
So those are movies that are so perfect that I'll never review them. Probably. Maybe. Probably not though. Although technically didn't I just kind of review them? I don't know. Anyway, like always, I decided to ask you guys, what movies do you find so perfect and great that you can't find any fault in them? Or whatever faults they do have, they're easily overlooked and dismissed. And I saw people say several movies that I just knew were going to get mentioned. Of course there was the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but there was also the original Star Wars trilogy. And I saw people mention the Snyder Cut, as well as Man of Steel and BVS, as well as Joker. But some more interesting ones I saw were Tron Legacy, Nightcrawler, the Pirates of the Caribbean films, The Social Network, Terminator 1 and 2, Inception, The Dark Knight, The Godfather, Pacific Rim, Godzilla 2014, Logan, Ford vs. Ferrari, the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, Into the Spider-Verse, Megamind, Dune, Prisoners. I think you get it. A wide variety of films people selected. And that's basically how I feel about the movies I listed earlier. They might have their flaws, they're not perfect in every single way, but I think the issues can be overlooked because the movies have so many good things about them. And of course, technically no movie is perfect because film is very subjective and it varies from person to person. So now what I want you to do is leave a comment, tell me a movie that is just flawless, perfect, or great to you. And whatever issues it has, you can just cast away to the side because you just love it that much. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, go and drop a like on it. Thanks for watching. My next video is going to be about Moon Knight.
I'm gonna come.
That's right, Peter. I'm you, and you're me, and this is a gun.